Ever feel like the whole world's telling you to just throw in the towel, but there's this little voice inside saying, nope, not yet?
Yeah. Well, that's exactly what we're diving into today.
Oh, cool.
Someone sent us this message, "It Ain't Over Yet," which I got to say, I love that title. And we've got this sermon, too, that's riffing on the same idea. So basically, we're going to break down what makes this message so powerful, Why does it hit home for so many people?
Okay. Sounds interesting. What have we got?
Well, right off the bat, this line in the message just grabbed me. What do you do when everything around you says quit, but God says hold on? I mean, talk about hitting the nail on the head, right?
It is pretty relatable, yeah. We've all been there. Totally. And the sermon, it starts with this really moving song about holding on when you want to let go. You can just feel everyone connecting with that feeling, like, yeah, I've been there.
That feeling of shared experience is so important. It's like both these sources, the message and the sermon, they get it. They get how tough it is to keep going sometimes. But then, boom, they tie it right back to faith, to resilience. It's almost like they're saying, look, it's tough, but guess what? You're not alone, and we can get through this.
That we're in this together feeling is so strong. So how do they actually unpack that, the whole facing your fears but keeping the faith thing?
They both use this really cool example from 2 Chronicles about King Jehoshaphat.
Oh, right. Yeah. Isn't that the one where he's about to get attacked by this massive army?
That's the one. Talk about a quit moment, right?
Totally. Like, what do you even do when the odds are stacked against you like that?
Exactly. And that's what's so interesting about how Jehoshaphat handles it. He goes straight to God in prayer, and he doesn't hold back. He's honest about being afraid, about not having enough, about being totally freaked out. He basically says, God, we are powerless. We have no clue what to do. Can you imagine that level of desperation?
Yeah. I wouldn't even know where to start. It's that feeling when you're in over your head, right? Like way over your head.
Exactly. But here's the key part. Jehoshaphat doesn't just stop there. He follows it up with, BUT, we're looking to you for help. That one little word, BUT, it changes everything.
Because he's admitting he can't do it on his own, but he still has faith that someone bigger can.
Exactly. And that's the heart of what both these sources are getting at. They get that we're human. It's natural to want to quit when things get rough. But at the same time, we got to cling to that little bit of faith. We got to trust that even when we don't have the answers, God does.
It's like that saying, when you get to the end of your rope, tie a knot and hold on. But in this case, it's more like tie a knot and trust that God's got the other end of that rope.
Yes. It's about surrendering, about letting go of control and trusting in a power way bigger than us.
So, okay, we've got that initial tension, the whole wanting to quit but knowing we have to hold on thing. Now, there's this other layer in both the message and the sermon that really resonated with me. The idea of battle fatigue.
Ah, yeah. It's like that feeling of just being worn out from fighting so much. You're tired of being on guard all the time. You just want to stop struggling.
Yeah. The message uses the phrase, too tired to fight another battle. And the sermon takes it even further, comparing it to spiritual PTSD. What do you think about that?
It's a strong comparison. But it makes sense, right? We're not just talking about one battle here. It's more like a whole bunch of challenges, one after the other, disappointment after disappointment. It wears you down. You start to lose hope. You wonder if you've got anything left.
And both sources, they totally get that. They paint this really vivid picture of someone who's been through the ringer. Like, they've been fighting for so long that they've forgotten what they're even fighting for. They're just running on empty.
Yeah, and that's when those sources take this really interesting turn. They start suggesting that maybe, just maybe, some of the battles we're fighting, we're not supposed to be fighting them at all.
Hold on. Are you saying we're not supposed to fight every battle? Now, that's something I think people need to hear more about.
Yeah, it's a really important point. It's not about just giving up, but more like figuring out what we're meant to deal with and what we need to let go of. It's kind of like the story of David and Goliath, the classic underdog story.
Oh, yeah. The little shepherd boy taking down this giant warrior. Love that story.
Right. But think about it. David didn't go into that fight like everyone else. He didn't put on all that heavy armor, didn't try to play by Goliath's rules. He went in with his total confidence in God,
Yeah.
He was like, this is the Lord's battle, not mine, and he's going to hand you over to us.
So instead of letting fear control him, David put his faith first. He trusted God even when it didn't make sense. That's a really powerful way to look at it.
Exactly. It's not about just sitting back and doing nothing. It's about making sure our actions line up with God's plan. We have to trust that he's fighting for us, even when we can't see it. And that brings up a question both the message and the sermon ask. Have you been trying to fight battles that aren't yours? Carrying burdens that God never meant for you to carry?
Wow, okay, that one hit me. It's so easy to get caught up in everyday life. You feel like you have to power through every single problem. We forget to stop and ask, wait, is this even my responsibility?
Right. Like we're programmed to constantly strive to prove ourselves. We forget that sometimes the bravest thing to do is just let go, to say, God, I trust you with this because I can't do this alone.
It's that whole let go and let God idea, which is way easier said than done, by the way, especially when everything inside you is screaming to fix it yourself. So how do we even tell the difference between the battles we should be fighting and the ones we need to leave to God? How do we know when to push forward and when to step back and trust?
Both the message and the sermon give us some clues.
Yeah.
They talk about the enemy's tactics and how these tactics try to keep us stuck in that cycle of stress and exhaustion.
Okay. Enemy's tactics. That sounds kind of intense, like we're in a spy movie or something.
Yeah, a little bit. But the sermon actually uses this really good analogy. It describes these tactics as a kind of propaganda campaign designed to wear us down, to make us doubt God's goodness, his faithfulness. But once we see those tactics for what they are, we can start to fight back.
Okay, so we've got this enemy out there trying to mess with our minds, make us doubt everything, and just completely give up. That's a lot to take in. So what can we do? What are these tactics we need to watch out for?
Well, both sources talk about a few really common ones. First, there's the classic unanswered prayer. You know that feeling when you're pouring your heart out to God and it seems like he's not even listening?
Oh, yeah. It's like, hello, is anyone there? You start to feel alone, like maybe you didn't pray hard enough or something.
Right. And that's exactly what the enemy wants you to think. He wants you to believe that God is distant, that your prayers don't matter, that you're all alone.
Okay, so how do we fight that? What do you do when prayer feels pointless?
It's not about pretending we don't have doubts. It's more about remembering who God is, even when we don't understand what he's doing.
It's like trusting someone you love even when they're acting kind of weird.
Exactly. And you know what else those sources point out? The enemy loves to take our problems and blow them way out of proportion.
Oh, tell me about it. Suddenly, this tiny thing seems like a huge, impossible mountain.
Exactly. And when you're already feeling exhausted, it's easy to get overwhelmed. You forget that God is bigger than any mountain.
It's like, don't believe everything you think. Our feelings are real, but they don't always match up with reality.
Right. And speaking of distorted thinking, another tactic is messing with our sense of time. Ever feel like God is running behind schedule?
Oh, all the time. That whole "where were you, God? I needed you yesterday" feeling.
Yeah. The enemy whispers, see? He's not coming. You're on your own.
Ugh, that's the worst. So then what? He's got us feeling alone, overwhelmed, and like God's forgotten about us. What else can he do?
Well, that's when he often tries to make us feel like following God is just too hard, too much work.
So not only are we exhausted and doubting everything, now we're supposed to believe that being a good Christian is just too complicated.
Right. It's like he's saying, look, you're tired, just give up, it's not worth it.
Okay, so the enemy is basically throwing everything he's got at us, trying to make us quit on God and quit on ourselves. How do we even stand a chance?
Both the message and this sermon offer a powerful solution. We have to change our worldview.
Worldview. That sounds kind of deep. What does that even mean?
It means changing the way we see the world, the way we interpret what happens to us. They use that story of Jesus walking on water. You know that one?
Yeah, that one's wild. The disciples think they're seeing a ghost, and then Peter's like, hold my sandals, I'm going for a walk.
Right. Everything they knew, everything they thought was possible told them people can't walk on water. But then Peter, in that moment of pure faith, he steps out of the boat and does the impossible.
Until he takes his eyes off Jesus and starts to sink.
Exactly. As long as Peter focused on Jesus, on the impossible made possible, he was fine. But the moment doubt crept in, the moment he focused on the wind and the waves, he sank.
So it's our faith, our focus on God, that lets us do amazing things. But when we let fear and doubt take over, we limit ourselves. We limit what God can do through us.
Right.
It's all about where we choose to look, right?
It's about acknowledging the storms, the reasons to be afraid, but then choosing to focus on Jesus, on who God is and what he can do.
It's about holding on to that "it ain't over yet" feeling, even when everything seems impossible, even when we can't see what God is doing.
Yes. And that's why that phrase is so powerful. It's a declaration that we're not giving up on God's promises, even when we feel like giving up on everything.
And it's not just about sitting around waiting for a miracle. It's about doing what we can, taking those steps of faith, even when we're scared.
You got it.
Yeah.
This message is about facing our problems head on, knowing that God is right there with us, fighting for us. And when we remember that, we can face anything. We can win any battle.
Yeah.
Because it ain't over until we win.
Wow, that was amazing. So much to think about. This message really is packed with wisdom.
It really is. And it's not just about information. It's about truly understanding ourselves, our faith, and who God is.
You know, for anyone listening who's in that tough spot right now, remember, it ain't over yet. God's still working. He's got amazing plans for you. Just hold on.